All right, welcome everyone to the HVAC 2.0 show. So we've got a good chunk of the gang here tonight. We got Tanner down in Alabama. We got Abby up in Canada, in Winnipeg. It's colder than Well-Diggers Patoot there. We got Jeff in Indianapolis. We got Reedy in North Carolina. And I am in Ohio. If you notice, my background looks a little bit different. So tonight we're going to be talking about something that's like it's been bothering us for a long time. Let's go ahead and scoot on back there, Ted. So it's the unintended consequences that are largely coming from regulations. So a lot of this goes back to SEER ratings, or now SEER 2. But now it's also very strongly related to the IRA because the IRA pushes for larger coils and, in general, worse dehumidification. And with 80% of the U.S. living in humid climates, this is a challenge. So regardless of whether we're talking electrification or we're just talking general equipment, this is a challenge. And particularly if you start measuring, you're going to start seeing things that we have going back a long time. So fundamentally, we ask this question: will regulations make us sick? And so we're talking about unintended consequences. Found a couple of nice little cartoons here. So the law of unintended consequences, often seen when a simple system tries to regulate a complex system. So Tanner, Reedy, and Jeff, is HVAC, and particularly HVAC in relationship to a home, a complex system?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Probably hell yes. It's a complicated system of systems with all sorts of weird interconnections. So
that's easy to screw up.
Looking at here. Oh man, yeah. There's so many different ways to screw it up, and man, we found a lot of them, which is why we talk so much about dehumidification. So I love this little cartoon too.
This is a great cartoon. This has been my experience with the New York program, and everybody that gets involved in programs in different states. Like, this is the perfect cartoon.
Yeah, this is totally it. Oh, I just need a little rock this size. It'll be fine. And then you let loose the unintended consequences. So we are very likely about ready to unleash a pretty serious public health problem. And it's going to be the fault of regulation as much as anything. So it makes us very nervous about this because we pay attention to this, and all of us here are on the hook in one way or another with boots on the ground. So it's an important thing to note. So taking a step back, we've been doing electrifications for a long time. So we're coming up on 10 years, which is kind of crazy that we've been doing it this long. This is the first house that we electrified. This is the tree house at Hiram College, where I'm sitting. It's actually 3 miles east of here. So I've spent a lot of time in this. If anybody has read my book, The Home Comfort Book, I wrote a significant portion of it sitting in the back office of this house because it was good peace and quiet. And through all of this, our biggest challenge has been dehumidification. And it's particularly in these older homes where they don't have a vapor barrier underneath the floor. Same thing could happen with like a crawl space home. So, and we've been watching these things for quite a while.
This is how we found out that humidification was going to be the problem is that by monitoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't realize it without the monitoring. The first guy we called was because of an Ecobee.
Yep. Ecobee thermostat, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the Cape of Learning, or I should have called it the Cape of Fear, because I was terrified through most of that project. We learned that dehumidification was a challenge there, and we have consistently seen that problem. We've been doing indoor air quality monitoring for a long time. The low cost air quality monitors came out in 2016. I mentioned 15 here. That's because we did air advice for a while and learned a lot from that, but also learned that it's a real pain in the tuchus dropping the thing off and picking it up. It's just not worth the effort in our experience. We just as soon spend a similar amount of money and drop a unit permanently. So the one on the left there called the Fubot, that turned out to be our favorite, sadly not on the market anymore. But we have learned this dehumidification challenge, boots on the ground, doing projects and monitoring what happened after the fact. And multiple times we've gone, oh crap, how do we keep this house dry?
We've had sick people. We've had VOCs go through the roof once you get to close to 60% relative humidity. We've had houses that were moldy because they were letting it stay above 60% for continued periods.
Yeah, we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, environmentally sensitive clients, a few of us here have dealt with them. They're really challenging. Um, it's really, really hard. And a lot of them come back to moisture not being controlled well enough in the house. And particularly, I mean, dehumidification is required in a lot of ways. First off, keep the water out. Second off, keep your humidity levels reasonable. So suffice it to say, we've been paying attention to this for a long time. So beer can cold, I am stealing this whole idea. This is normally goes back to a joke and a meme within the HVAC industry of when you turn the air conditioner on for the first time after firing it up, installing a new one, you hold the end, and if it's beer can cold, you're good to go. You let it loose. But I want to recapture this in a different way. Actually, go back a slide there, Ted. When air conditioning coils get cold enough to collect condensation, they start looking just like these beer cans where you're getting condensation on the outside. That is when dehumidification begins. The coils have to get cold enough before any of this happens. And that's a real challenge. So now you can hit me with the next one. So this is a quick explanation, and then we're going to dive into a much deeper one is what we're going to do here. So it typically takes 5 to 15 minutes of runtime before an air conditioner gets the coil cold enough to start dehumidifying. So if it's oversized, it may not run that much. And as we run to higher SEER stuff, oversized high efficiency HVAC may never hit condensation point, which means it's not going to dehumidify at all. As we're going to look at some numbers later, that's on the table. And that's a problem because, again, 80% of Americans live in humid climates. And they're actually getting more humid, as we'll look at in a little bit. So
one of the unfortunate things also is you can be much more comfortable in a house that's 76 degrees, 47% relative, than a house that's 68 degrees, 65% relative.
100%. That's how you avoid thermostat wars in a lot of ways. So guys can be comfortable at 75 degrees as long as humidity is low, and the ladies will oftentimes be comfortable as well. Because in general, women have slower metabolisms than men do. So just kind of how it works. So what we see is over time, if you have bad dehumidification in a house, the house gets wet, and in time, the people get sick from that house being wet. We've seen this again and again, boots on the ground. My mom is moisture sensitive. I ride the edge myself because I've worked in too many of these houses. So this is a significant risk that could lead to all kinds of bad things. And a lot of it, again, goes back to policy, which is what we're talking about here. This is a slide from last week that we talked about with the IRA incentives. You need to pay attention to your sensible heat ratios. We'll be defining those in a few minutes tonight. But there is a very high risk of dehumidification challenges looking at the federal IRA incentives. The state has its own challenges, but we're looking mainly at the federal because that's probably what's likely to get used. So high SEER 2, which is required, it's not crazy high, but it's reasonably high. Generally have to use the larger indoor coils. The larger the coil is, the warmer it runs, the less it dehumidifies. So that can be a real challenge. I struggle with that in our house in West Virginia, where I should have picked one size smaller on the coil and I didn't. And that, amongst a bunch of other things, gives me significant dehumidification challenges. I deeply regret the Bosch heat pump that I put in that house, which is one of the least expensive ways to meet the IRA requirements to get to $2,000. And we're going to look at another piece of equipment that is one of the least expensive ways to get there, and that's a challenge. The other piece is we are going to be sizing the heating load, which is typically 1.5 to 2.5 times cooling load. And there's rules of how much you can oversize equipment for cooling load, and this is going way outside that realm. Somebody's saying Bosch is a piece of, we'll just say crap. It's a different word. It can be. It works all right in some ways, but I regret the decision.
Reedy has a story he'll tell later. I just muted him though because his volume's a little too high and he's getting feedback.
Oh, there we go. And then the lowest cost equipment that meets the IRA incentives has bad sensible heat ratios, which again, we're going to get to. Hit next, Ted. And this is for the insulation contractors, for the HVAC contractors watching, offer ventilating dehumidifiers as a cover your butt. Very, very important to do this. I say this as I hear mine running above me here because we have an XT155 in this house.
It's easy to offer. Don't try to sell it.
Yep.
Just ask.
Yeah, exactly. You're just making them aware that it exists and that this is likely to be a challenge. But here's the thing that just kills us about this whole thing. You're going to save $2,000 in tax credits, but then you're going to have to spend $6 to $10,000 for a ventilating dehumidifier if you're talking a whole house. And because they generally don't last the lifespan of the piece of equipment, you're going to buy 2 of them. So you save $2,000 so that you can spend 12 to 20. Good job. It's very frustrating knowing kind of the natural path of things. All right, so key takeaways for tonight. Efficiency standards and programs push us towards equipment with lower dehumidification capabilities. We're going to walk through some of those pieces. We need more dehumidification, not less, for a bunch of different reasons, and this goes back quite a while. Houses without vapor barriers on the ground. So like I'm thinking about, say, pre-1950 homes where they don't have vapor barrier underneath either the crawl space floor or the basement floor. And then always offer a ventilating dehumidifier as an offer to client. Always, always, always put that on your quote. So here's what we're actually going to dive into, though. Those were the takeaways. So first off, dehumidification is a long-standing concern for us. This is not a new thing that we've been talking about, and particularly in older homes, because the first 4 electrifications we did were pre-1920. They're all 100-year-old homes in Cleveland. There are many, many forces that are pushing us towards increased dehumidification problems. We're going to talk about sensible heat ratio. It's nerdy, but it's really important. We're going to look at a few specific pieces of HVAC equipment, and then we're going to talk about what the potential solutions are for these issues. So for starters, I want to just touch on this presentation that I gave. Take a look at that date. Actually, hit next slide, Ted. I circled the date. This is from October of 2018. This is not a new thing. If you go look at me with Bill Smone at the very beginning of the Building HVAC Science podcast, episode 2 is me talking about how the most critical piece of maintaining indoor air quality is humidity control. So this is not a new thing for us, but now we're seeing all these forces pushing us to where we're like, holy crap, we're about to make a whole lot of buildings sick and their occupants sick with them. And this is really concerning because I'm very pro electrification. I mean, look, I'm wearing a shirt that says electrify everything. And I own electrifyeverything.net. This is something that we think is a good idea and it's inevitable. It's where we're going. But if we provide bad experiences, it's going to get slowed down because of all the negatives. Like I talked about last week, like the 1980s diesels that were miserable turned Americans off of diesels for 40 years.
And you're not going to be solving these problems with PCOs and ionizers the way that a lot of morons think. You're like, oh, we're going to run into these mold problems. We're just going to throw this magical stuff in the ductwork and it's just going to magically go away.
Who was it that posted a picture the other day of it was an ionizer that had mold growing on the surface of the thing? So
they should save that for their sales flyer.
Yep. All right, I'm going to pop this up for a second. We will come back to this question. Is anyone in opposition of using non-RA match systems geared towards sensible latent? I have a 3-ton VNA 8, which A, doesn't qualify in northern climates, and B, I have a small coil paired with it for better dehumidification sitting in the shed of this house right now. So yes, we're game for that, but you don't get the $2,000. And a lot of people are going to be asking about the $2,000, and you can't use that in northern climates anymore anyway, this particular system. All right. So this is another couple of slides from that, the coming mold explosion, which is no longer coming. It's here. And the theme of this particular, not show, but the conference was practice to research. And so this is a little tiny slot or a little tiny slide coming out of the Home Comfort book, talking about how 35 to 55 dew points or about 30 to 60% relative humidity is where we want to play. And we much prefer capping that at about 50%. so that you keep yourself out of trouble. Because
Yeah, it's our policy to tell people to run their relative between 20 and 50.
Yep,
Up
exactly.
to, well, like, so we don't get into climate zone 7, so who knows what they should do.
Well, they'll be on the lower side.
Yeah.
Same with 8.
They'll have to put up with a little bit of static in the winter.
Yep. Yeah, it is what it is. And I've got at least one friend that lives in climate zone 8. Oh, Tanner just popped in, putting a non-RE match green speed in his own house. So there you go. You're not getting the $2,000, are you?
I'll just keep my reasons to myself as to what I think they can do with their $2,000.
Your honey badger's not hanging on the wall, so we probably could guess if that was there.
Yeah, it's right there.
Is it?
She's hanging up in the background.
It's so small I can barely see it. Okay.
Exactly. Small, lightweight, offensive, just like we like them.
I think it has a nice, pleasant kick for the record. That was fun in Florida. All right. So practice of research. This is another really key chart to be aware of. These are a bunch of various indoor air quality risks and then the relative humidity ranges that they run in. So this comes from a paper back in the 80s. It's pretty consistently cited. And note that like this is showing 40 to 60. We really think 30 to 50 is more where it should be. But note that there's all kinds of bad things that happen on the bottom and the high end of relative humidity. So from bacteria to viruses, fungi, which can be mold as well on the high side. Above 60, things start happening, respiratory issues, allergies, the chemical interactions, TVOCs, those are directly related from a number of different studies.
Yeah, and if you look at those, they start to get pretty bad after 50.
Yep, exactly. And then ozone, you don't want to be too low. But you don't want it to be too high either. So this is the happy place is basically 30 to 50. So that is what the conclusion that we've been running on. Now, these couple of pictures, these are from my friend Neil Comparetto of, I'm trying to think of the name of his company now, Comfort Squad. It's him and John Semmelhack. So if you're in the Charlottesville or Richmond, Virginia area, you're very lucky to have those two to be able to come help you. But this is a house where they were keeping the thermostat in cooling mode. It's showing 69 here. They were running cooler, 67, 68. And so the inside of the knee walls, which we went over a couple of weeks ago, were just growing mold everywhere. It was really problematic because they were running the surface of that drywall below dew point and it was touching outdoor air and we were causing all kinds of mold issues. So that temperature needed to get raised and then the relative humidity of the dew point needed to get lowered to solve that. So this is a slide out of that deck, again, 2018. Next up. Like I said, long-standing concern. And now there's a bunch of forces that are pushing us towards increased issues. Next slide. This is, again, 2018. I've been talking about this. These two on the bottom I added, but these other ones are from a 2018 slide deck. So we are seeing increased dew points in most of the country. We're seeing increased heavy downpours, like 1 inch and up downpours are up significantly over the past 30 to 40 years. Engineered building materials have become common. I love Joe Stiebrick. I think it's OSB. He calls it waswood. Maybe that's a spam of wood, and I think MDF is waswood. So engineered building materials, all of the newer building materials basically have much more moisture sensitivity compared to the older ones. You talk about old school plaster and lath and old school old growth wood, you have to work really hard to get that stuff to mold up. This new stuff, if you look at it sideways, it will grow mold on it. Increased shading, that just happens naturally. Trees are growing larger. Stephen Reardon and I went to look at a house in North Carolina, and we were trying to figure out what was making this house go so sideways so quickly. And one of the factors, we looked at the photos of when the house was built, and the trees were way higher. So if you don't have solar load, you don't have the sun shining on the house, there's not as much drying potential. There's not enough heat drying that house out. So that was one of a number of factors that tipped that house to be really problematic. And then these other two things, sizing to heating for electrification, which again is about double what your cooling load is, and now horrible sensible heat ratios for some equipment, which we're going to touch on exactly what that means in just a minute here. This was the article that got my attention about this whole thing. So notice that this is from August of 2009. I remember reading this when we were in Cleveland Heights at the time. And so the daytime temperatures weren't up, but the nighttime temperatures are. Nighttime temperature controls dew point fundamentally. Like there's other things that do, but like if it gets to 50 degrees at night, the dew point cannot be above 50 degrees because physics. It's going to end up sticking to the grass and the sides of the houses and the buildings and things like that. That's just where it's going to go. And Abby, I see Ted. HVAC dehumidification down. Yeah, we're going to touch on that deeper in a minute, Abby. But that was the one that got my attention. And then I saw this article, and this is back from 2015 with climatecentral.com. And so I was born in 78. So within my lifetime, and this is going back 8 years ago now, note that the dew points are up from 59 to a little over 62. So a 3-degree bump. And if I remember correctly, going back to 1950, they're up about 5 degrees. This is a significant additional amount of moisture that we need to deal with. Our house in West Virginia, there are weeks where we go outside and it smells like mold just outside because it's a little bit lower where we are, and the temperature ends up being 2 to 3 degrees cooler than it is at the top of the hill, which gets us close to dew point, and everything just gets wet. I've never been in a place that's so freaking wet so consistently. So the dehumidifier is constantly running, and we're seeing this where for most of the country, dew points are up within most of our lifetimes. Tanner, sorry, it's only like 2 degrees, dude. But the rest of us here have seen a bit more. If anybody knows John Tooley, he is one of the names within the building science world. He and Joe Stiebrick. John is far nicer than Joe. Joe will take your head off and make fun of you. John is a very pleasant individual, and he lives in South Carolina. And he talked about how his summer dew points used to be in the upper 60s, and now he's consistently seeing the 70s and sometimes into the 80s. Reedy, you may be able to back this up being in North Carolina. Are you noticing higher dew points?
I can't. Yes, we definitely are noticing higher dew points. My green speed, it dehumidifies quite a bit more than it used to, and it's because of the dew points. It's directly because of those.
Yep, it's more humidity in the air. Ken Gehring, who invented the ventilating dehumidifier, or co-invented, he's known as Teddy Bear on HVAC Talk. If anybody goes over there, it's still a good forum to this day. It's very old school. It'll definitely feel like 2004 called they want their user experience back, but there's good discussions going on there. And some very smart folks. And Teddy Bear is one of those. This is a slide that he gave down in Florida. And this is dew points above 55 towards the end of September last year. And note how much of the country is in that range. So you're seeing lots of 70-degree dew points all over the place. That's where things start getting really hard to deal with. And particularly that time of year, because it's probably not that hot outside. It's not like it's 90 degrees out. It's probably 75, 80, maybe 85 at the most. So there's a lot of humidity to remove, but not necessarily that much cooling to be done at this time of year. And this is when things go really sideways in homes, and you see chemical levels go crazy. You get comfort complaints. You now smell where the dog peed last year. There's all kinds of things that happen. All right, next
and also
up.
correlate, looking at this map of all these 70-degree dew points, what is typical set points for people? If it's 75-degree dew points outside and somebody's keeping it 68 degrees because they're trying to compensate, what happens in all those areas where that moisture is leaking in because the house is leaky? What happens there? And if you can't dehumidify, you're not drying that space back out to even try to somewhat manage it. So then what happens?
Things get wet, and if there's dirt on surfaces, they grow mold.
Exactly.
And we saw that in Neil's picture from back in 2018. So that was, like I said, when I said the coming mold explosion, it's here, it's been here. And this was one that surprised
to make
me.
that clear, that's the back side of the drywall. So the homeowner doesn't see that.
Mm-hmm.
You won't see it.
It's the drywall in the crawl space, because that drywall is cold. The drywall has been driven cold by the air conditioning, and that cold has gone through to the back side of the drywall where it's hot and moist.
Yep. And it's happening in places where nobody's ever at, that you can't see inside the wall. So people don't see it until it's a massive problem.
So those folks were getting ill from the mold in their homes.
Yes. And so you're going to have it's a common thing. Oh, well, I've been doing it a certain way and I've never had a problem. It's like, well,
all of a sudden you got to remove all your drywall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a really challenging and frankly scary thing. And we're making it worse with policy right now. All right. So just because you're in a dry climate doesn't mean humidity control isn't important. So this is Justin Bright, who's a friend of mine, and you can see he's indoor air quality guy as well. So he notes in California, which is generally a pretty dry climate, utility program pilot had been converted to all mini splits. Mini splits tend to not do a very good job of dehumidification. One of many reasons we aren't big fans. And a long story short, the uncontrolled indoor humidity was so bad they had to demolish the two homes and rebuild them. So, and this was a dry Southern California climate. So like you can still have moisture coming out of the earth and causing issues.
I've never had a problem until I had to tear down the house and rebuild it because it was so bad.
Man, yeah. There's a indoor swimming pool in the basement. It was one of the ones that it creates a natural current, so you can just swim in a fairly small pool. And that was a spec home in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and they tore that down because of that thing. It rotted the house out. And that house was 15 or 20 years old when they ripped it down. Wasn't that old. So, all right, sensible heat ratio. This is a really, really critical thing to understand. So if you're an HVAC contractor, hopefully this will kind of be review. And if you're a policymaker, pay attention. This is really, really important right here. All right, next up. So there is heat and there is humidity. Like I'm sure most people on the East Coast have heard the phrase, it's not the heat, it's humidity. Yep, you're right. So these have different names within the HVAC world, though. The heat is the sensible, and the latent is the humidity. And next slide, I define what these are. So all air conditioners do both of these all the time. It just varies how much. Sensible is cooling. So that is taking heat out of the air. So that is actually lowering what the thermostat says. Latent is dehumidification. And technically what it is it's forcing a phase change from vapor to liquid. That's what we're doing. We're taking water vapor out of the air, and we are condensing it on the coil like that beer can I showed earlier. And then it drips off the bottom of the coil and it gets drained out of the house.
It takes a fair amount of energy to do this. This phase change takes a fair amount of energy. It's what drove the Industrial Revolution, was that energy, steam.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. And so basically, as we drive to higher efficiency levels, fundamentally what we are doing is we are giving up dehumidification and increasing how much sensible cooling we're doing, which we're going to get to. So this ratio
and pretending
vary.
that's saving
That's
energy.
Good. Yeah, it's good because I told you it's good. Because it uses less energy. There's times you want to use more energy. My 20 SEER heat pump in West Virginia, my dehumidifier consistently uses more power than my very efficient air conditioner, because the air conditioner doesn't dehumidify. That's a problem. And this is where we are headed with a huge swath of this equipment, particularly the lower end stuff, which Rita, you talked about last week. You have a client that came to you, I want the $2,000 and I want to get it the cheapest way possible. And that is with equipment that sucks at dehumidification. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. All right, next up. So let's talk about the sensible heat ratio. So you're going to do some sensible work and some latent work. The what do you call it? The thing at the bottom that says sensible latent. Ideally, those would be reversed. Old school inefficient air conditioner was like 50-50. You might even get to where you're doing 60 or 65% dehumidification and only a third cooling. Your kind of modern-ish equipment until just recently, so say 10 to 13 SEER, you're typically seeing a 0.75. So you're doing 25% dehumidification, 75% sensible, give or take. Now, keep in mind that only happens after the equipment has run for 5 or 10 minutes. So it's very important to understand. So if it only runs for 7 minutes, guess what happens? You don't get any dehumidification because the coil never got cold enough. This brings us to high efficiency equipment where we can routinely see 0.9 sensible heat ratio, which means they're only doing 10% dehumidification. This is a problem. And what's worse is some of this equipment purposely to get to the high efficiency levels is running a 0.99. So it's doing 1% dehumidification. And say you're at that 0.91, going back a slide, if the system doesn't run for long enough, it never even gets to that. So it never starts dehumidifying at all. And this is what we've been sacrificing in large part as we've been marching the SEER ratings up and up and up. So we're to the point where really going further doesn't make much more sense unless we introduce some other pieces to the puzzle, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah. And if you want to understand why adding a bigger evaporator coil to a smaller condenser increases the efficiency, this is why. There's a certain amount of workload the unit can do, and you're just chopping off a portion of the latent removal and just throwing it out. So now you're just not doing it. And since you're not doing that, using less energy. If you're using less energy, it's more efficient.
Yep.
That's why the guy at the supply house tells you, oh yeah, you're getting a 3 ton. Well, if you'll just go ahead and get a 3.5 ton coil on top of it, we'll bump you on up a few SEER ratings. There's what you're doing.
Right. It's a challenge. It's really a challenge. And as everything right now is pushing us to oversized equipment, size to heating, and to higher efficiencies, which also hurts our dehumidification capability. So this is the technical reason why we are freaked the hell out about all of this stuff. We're about to make a bunch of people sick, and a whole lot of people are going to start thinking that heat pumps suck. When they don't, it's the efficiency standards at the end of the day. So we need to be really, really careful about this.
Yeah, well, efficiency standards, it's the sizing, it's the whether or not it can run on multiple stages.
Yep. All pieces of the puzzle that we'll get to in a moment. All right, next up. So the 0.99 here, this leads to wet houses and sick people with very high levels of certainty. There's a doctor within the environmentally sensitive market that says that about a third of people have the gene that makes them sensitive to mold. So it's kind of like having allergies. I'm allergic to half the freaking outdoors. I've taken a bunch of injections for it. I'm better than I used to be, but I still have challenges. But I know that I am one of the ones that is allergic to mold. And about a third of people are. You're okay until you push people to where they are beyond what they are capable of handling, and then you get into your allergic reactions and things get really bad really fast. This is not a place we want to push people. And guess what? As an industry, we are pushing people towards environmental sensitivity. This is not scare tactics. This is just freaking math. This is where we're going. All right. So let's take a look at a couple of specific pieces of HVAC equipment. So Reedy, I think you've worked with this one. Have you worked with the 38 Mura, right? From Carrier?
Yes. I
Okay.
definitely have.
So this is a mini split based system that's dumb. So it can't change the fan speed, the indoor fan speed very well. And that's fundamentally what you need to do. You want to be able to slow that fan speed down as much as possible, which makes the coil run colder, which makes it dehumidify better. So what we're looking at here, these are some kind of confusing numbers. Like I still struggle with getting my head around wet bulbs. So you see the first one, it's IDWBF, that is indoor wet bulb in Fahrenheit, that is related to dew point, but is generally still higher than what the dew point is. So it's somewhere between the dew point and then the indoor dry bulb temperature, the actual temperature inside. So the second one there, IDDB, that is indoor dry bulb That's the actual temperature of the space, not including any humidity. So what we're looking at here is a 60.8 wet bulb. Let's call that a 58 dew point, something like that, just to throw a number out there that may or may not be about right, but it's probably in the ballpark. And then a 77 degree indoor temperature. So next slide, it'll pop up to 0.95. There's our sensible heat ratio. The S over T, that's sensible over temperature, or well, what it says right below it, sensible cooling capacity ratio. So that's the sensible heat ratio. So at that airflow, at those temperature conditions, that system, it is only doing 5% dehumidification. We need about 25% for most markets to actually be okay. More is better, less is not. So this is like a fifth of where we need to be. Anybody see a problem? Bueller? All right, next up. So here's a Daikin Fit. We put a couple of these in our Airbnbs in West Virginia, and I've been really impressed by these pieces of equipment. Now, these are communicating. I'll define that in a minute. Take a look at similar conditions. Now, there aren't identical conditions. Like this is expanded cooling data, which is what I was pulling that other stuff from as well. These are both 1.5 ton units. I have direct experience with the 1.5 ton units. My experience has been if the outdoor temperature gets to 75 degrees or warmer, these units do a very good job of dehumidification in the house. Like I've been shocked actually how well they've done. Genuinely surprised how well they've done until it gets to where they can't do it, and then you need a dehumidifier. But take a look at similar conditions. So we were looking at 75 indoor or 77 indoor temp before. Go back one, Ted. So 75 indoor temp, and then that is a 71 degree dew point, or I think that's something along those lines. I can't even read that. Anyway, at those conditions, that thing is doing 62% dehumidification and only 38% cooling. That thing is an animal at that condition. You are dehumidifying, and there's water just running off the coil in a consistent stream. And I've seen that with this system where my Bosch, which is very similar to the Carrier we just looked at, I thought that my condensate line where the moisture off the coil is supposed to drip out, I thought it was disconnected because I never, through an entire summer with a very humid climate, saw any water coming out of that line. And I changed some settings and got to where, I could get something, but then it didn't operate the way I wanted. These little things, these little Daikin Fit, man, there's always at least a drip, and sometimes there's a stream coming out of there. This is a really nice piece of equipment for dehumidification. Has really impressed me, to be frank. And anybody who knows me well knows that I don't speak well about equipment unless I really think well about the equipment. I won't pull punches on stuff. All right, so comparing to the same conditions, or as close as we can get, this is a 59 indoor wet bulb for where we were at 60.8 for the last one. Look at the different airflows here. So on the almost to the left, you see the 520, the 610, and the 700. Those are the airflows in the coil. That's cubic feet per minute. Note that at 520, we've got a pretty nice sensible heat ratio of 0.75. And then it gets worse at 610 at 0.83. And then note that it goes to 1. So it's doing no dehumidification at all when that fan is running at 700 CFM under those conditions. So fan speed, indoor fan speed, is fundamentally what makes or breaks you. And you need to be able to control it separately, or it doesn't matter. If you don't have a communicating system, you generally can't control fan speed well. There are exceptions, and I'd love to hear more about them from people, but it's a challenge. Oh, and I see, I thought 38 Mur is a condenser. That is the outdoor unit. But I showed what the pairing is. It's a 40 something or other with the 40 MUAA air handler. It doesn't really matter in this case. This is not communicating. So going back to the discussion of sensible heat ratios, remember how we need at least a 0.75 where we're doing 25% dehumidification. The Daikin Fit is hitting that just barely at 0.75 with these conditions. Under very similar but not identical conditions, the Carrier 38 Mura is only getting to 0.95. So that is not good enough. Guess which one of these is the cheaper product to install and still get the IRA $2,000? It's the Mura. Guess who's going to get to buy a dehumidifier? So, Reedy, was that you that just saw that actually?
Yeah, it wasn't
Was
with
Mura.
the MURA, it was with the Bosch. But whenever someone wants one of these, we don't mind offering it, but we also offer a ventilating dehumidifier at the same time.
That's the only safe path that I see moving forward.
Yes.
It's-
And at that point, you should have just bought a green speed or a 5-stage. And
Yeah.
how much energy are you really saving? Because you got to run the dehumidifier.
You didn't. I mean, what's your cost difference? 4, 5, 6 grand, maybe something like that.
Yeah, it's like 6,000.
Yeah. So there you go. So one dehumidifier, and you can basically take care of most of that issue. You may still need a $250 dehumidifier for covering some of your weird shoulder seasons, but yeah, it helps a lot. So note to self, oversized, and this is just coming back around, oversized high efficiency HVAC may not hit condensation point. That's what we're seeing with the 0.95 sensible heat ratio. That's terrible. And we saw some ones in there too. That's terrible. This is going to make people sick. It's not a matter of if, it's merely a matter of when and how many. This is a problem. All right, next up. And then I put in just the your pie charts of these. So the Daikin fit in this case is good enough, and the Carrier 38 MURA is not. It's way insufficient. All right, so let's see what the solutions look like. Oh, I'm seeing this. Can communicate. I've heard that. Please let us know how that goes and what thermostat you're using. I would get yourself some kind of indoor air quality monitor in so that you can watch what's going on. And if you haven't yet, offer a ventilating dehumidifier. Offer that now before you get yourself in a pickle later. I saw that Matt Reisinger a few years ago did this for, I think it was his in-laws. And I was like, so does that thing work okay? And dug into it some. And I'm like, I don't want one of those. I already did that with the Bosch. I'm not doing that again. All right, so here are our potential dehumidification solutions. There's 5. There's really more than this. But the cheap and easy way is you solve with a basic Energy Star dehumidifier. You can also do a whole house dehumidifier, also known as a ventilating dehumidifier. You can use communicating equipment, which helps, doesn't totally solve. You can size towards cooling, and you can use reheat dehumidification. So let's tackle these quickly one at a time. So the first one is a basic Energy Star dehumidifier, $200, $300, maybe $400 if you're looking at a big one. Get one with a pump so that you don't have to drain it right where it is necessarily. That would be my recommendation. And the bad part of those is they typically only last 1 to 3 years. So you're going to be buying several of them, and you may need several of them to carry the load, right, Reedy? Then you see 2 in that house?
That's right. In the Bosch house, 2 of them.
Yep. Yeah. So you may need 2 or 3 to get the job done. So it's a good thing you got a 20 SEER heat pump so that you can run 2 dehumidifiers to try and keep up with the moisture load that it can't deal with. The second thing is a ventilating dehumidifier. And we talked about this a couple of episodes ago. We're big fans of these. I hear mine running upstairs, the fan's running. That's providing fresh air to this house right now. These are nice, but keep in mind, this is the best warranty at 6 years, and most equipment has 10-year warranties. So the odds are pretty high you're buying 2 of these in the lifespan of the equipment, which is going to make things expensive when we try to think about clients. All right, next up. So we can run communicating HVAC. This is kind of a messy slide, but this is a Carrier green speed here. And what I'm trying to show is the indoor unit, the outdoor unit, and the thermostat can all talk to each other and make minute adjustments. There's a whole, every brand has their communicating equipment. The Daikin Fit is unique in that it's communicating, but it's also on the low cost side, which is pretty nice. So hopefully we'll see some of that, but it doesn't have reheat, which we'll get to in a minute. And so that can still have dehumidification challenges, even though it's pretty good. But communicating equipment's a big piece of the puzzle. Next up is sizing towards cooling. So in general, heat load is between 1.5 and 2.5 times cooling. So say you have a 4-ton heat load, your cooling load is going to be 1.5 to 2.5 tons, something like that. So you can size towards cooling, size it small, and cover the difference with resistance heat. So we've done that on several projects, and that can work pretty well. There will be some grid planners that are freaking out about that. Fix your rates and we'll stop doing this. We don't work for you. We work for clients. We do what's best for our clients, not what's best for the grid. I honestly, I care about the grid, but I don't care about the grid because you're not paying me. So align the incentives. And then the other really nice solution, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, is reheat dehumidification, which is where you run the air conditioner, which takes out, you want to hit the next slide, Ted, takes out the heat and the humidity. And then you use the resistance strips, the backup heat, to add the heat back in so that you get dry room temperature air out. That's what you're trying to do. And this lets you get away with, if you have the right equipment, big if. I tried that with the Bosch down there at an 824 American Standard. And it's not programmed well. It didn't work, which sucked.
You also have to have it properly sized, or you may not. I mean, there are a lot of reasons that you may not be a fan of communicating equipment, and it's probably not the equipment's fault.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if everything is talking to each other, is communicating. So like you're kind of stuck with that. Communicating equipment is super sensitive to power differences. So like you need to have, shoot, my mind's blanking on the phrase. What do you guys have? Yeah, surge protection. Thank you. You need to have surge protection on preferably the indoor and the outdoor unit, definitely the outdoor, so you don't roach it.
Well, it's good to have a surge protector and voltage monitoring, because controls, and anyone that's ever worked in the commercial space on controls, you know that if you have an over voltage situation, it'll begin to fry, control boards and stuff like that. That's low voltage if it runs outside of that operating voltage zone. So that really starts to become, dependent on your area. There's some areas where everyone knows it's like, oh, well, this particular utility in my area, there's one in particular that it's just known that their voltages go up because they just can't control it. I guess they suck at their job. I don't know. And in those situations, it's a good idea to have a voltage monitor that can kill power to the unit if voltage runs out of those ranges. And as long as you do that, you'll be fine. It's usually small things like that gets overlooked that causes people to be like, oh, well, I'm not messing with that equipment anymore. It always has problems.
Yep.
And it's like, well, sort of, but not really.
Exactly. So Tim wrote in here, systems with poor sensible heat ratio probably aren't good candidates for reheat dehumidification. No crap, Sherlock. I learned that the hard way with my Bosch, which doesn't dehumidify. So the reheat feature is really good at making a lot of noise because it ramps the fan way the heck up, and then burning a lot of juice and accomplishing nothing. All I do is add the heat that the thing has to remove, and I might as well just use the dehumidifier to get done. So yeah, Bosch is not great for this. Most Mitsubishi models aren't good for this. This is why we don't use Mitsubishi. I'm sorry. Apparently Tim's told me there's a couple that are okay, but in general, I'm nervous about them. Plus their communication's and their control is So I'm sensitive about all this stuff.
It just goes to show that this is a big puzzle and there's a bunch of pieces. And just because one piece fits perfectly and it's great and wonderful, it doesn't make the whole picture look good. And so you can sure electric reheat, it's amazing. But if you use it in the wrong way, it's a waste. You're just inflicting more pain on the already pre-existing pain.
Nate, about the someone put on there that the MURA can communicate. They do. That is, they communicate like a mini split communicates. It doesn't mean that they dehumidify well, just like a mini split doesn't dehumidify very well. What it means is that it sort of communicates. And the key thing about the MURA, if you look in the instructions way down after all of the data that they show, all the things that you showed, what it really comes down to is that you have to size that thing by the sensible heat. That's why they put all those charts in there, is that if you don't size it by the sensible heat, you're in big trouble. And so that's their own description of their own product.
Will that create complaints on the how to stay?
It might.
You're going to be undersized.
Well, it very well may.
You're going to have to undersize that equipment.
Yeah, and also that's wording, half of heating.
Yeah, the wording is something like this. It's if you have a high sensible heat load, then you need to size it by sensible heat. So it's kind of contradictory of what we've always heard. In the HVAC business is to just size by whatever you get. This one, if you don't pay attention to that, you're really going to run into trouble, and then it's not going to do well anyways, because you run into what happens if we can't keep up.
Yeah, it's really sensitive to your matchups, being able to select the condenser with the proper air handler, because there's multiple different options you can pair. And so the problem here is since the IRA is geared towards pushing towards a higher SEER equipment, well, what do you think the difference is in the higher SEER matchup versus the lower SEER matchup? It's that sensible heat ratio. And so if you don't do that right, I mean, it's going to be in a scenario where, okay, what happens if the equipment is okay, size it to where you get good dehumidification, or size it to where you get the $200 tax credit. That's a difficult discussion to have for people. And then there's the talk of it being communicating. Well, sure, you can look at certain communicating equipment like the green speed, and it works, it works great because everything's actually like sending data to and from one another. This particular carrier unit, the mini split outdoor units, they communicate with the indoor unit, but that's it. The thermostat is just a standard thermostat that just tells it to run. And then the unit itself is just telling, okay, we're going to start at this speed, and then we're going to speed up after a certain amount of time. And then after a little bit longer, we'll speed up again. And then it's just monitoring at a suction pressure. Well, these controls that's in it is set to try to achieve high SEER ratings. And what does it do? Runs a higher cold temperature. And what happens then? No dehumidification.
The first version of this, the MARBQ and the MBAA air handler, if you put it on an Ecobee thermostat, up until they came out with the EB State 6, what would happen is if you wanted it to dehumidify, like what you and I were talking about earlier, Tanner, if you wanted it to dehumidify, it would you would either have to get rid of the heat strips, or if you had heat strips and you allowed the Ecobee to do the dehumidification, it would bring the heat strips on. And so it's a mess. It's a mess. And I know that because we put one of those MARBs with the MBAA in. We actually put two in. We put a 2-ton because they said it could go down to 6,700 BTUs and it wouldn't dehumidify. So we pulled it out and put a 12,000 BTU in there, and it wouldn't dehumidify, and it made the house hot because the heat strips came on. So you pick.
But we're not headed for this problem, are we, gents?
We are here.
Well, this is what happens when you have poor goals. When your goal is something that is just arbitrary and makes no sense, and you don't understand the consequences, here's what you get. You get the manufacturers are making equipment that's geared towards what people are going to buy. And what do people want to buy? They want efficiency. For whatever reason.
We've been telling them that for years.
By the government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like windows are a good idea, regardless of the fact they save like 2 to 5% per year. And that's oftentimes only in a cooling dominated climate, a heating dominated climate.
300-year payback on windows.
If you're lucky, You know, if Jesus had bought Windows, he'd be getting his payback right now. Like, I mean, it's seriously like forever.
You use the
what
free
happens when you're
quote
rushed.
process is what happens if you're rushed.
Yep, we're going to get to that in a minute. A couple of other comments to definitely touch on. So, Brian, I hear you. You don't like communicating because you're married for life. Find another solution, measure, let us know that it works. And like, it's not that I'm not open and we aren't open to other solutions, but we've tried and we've failed. So we're telling you what we know works from experience, and that is communicating. And it's basically the carrier stuff, one of which we can't use anymore. Bryant has the stuff, and then Train and American Standard have some units. I don't have much experience, but Stephen Reardon does. And heating and cooling services. I just don't think there's really any better option than an optimized 15 SEER system from an efficiency or standpoint, comfort standpoint. You need to define optimized. Are we sizing the heating? Are we sizing the cooling?
It doesn't matter because it's not. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and then
so you own responsibility for all of those mistakes that you're not aware of are mistakes because. And why are you not aware that they're mistakes? It's because you don't have all of the monitoring that we've done. We didn't realize we were making mistakes until we started monitoring.
Yep.
So
yeah,
if you don't have any monitoring, you're making mistakes. And until you monitor, you can't prove that you're not.
Yeah. So
I want to hit on something real quick. What happens when you're rushed? Well, a lot of times what happens when people are rushed is that they will upsize equipment or do something that a client would like to. So education prior to, during, and after, and responsibly avoiding responsibility is key. And don't make the client being rushed on you. Don't take that responsibility. You take that responsibility.
Amen.
Then you're going to get into a lot of problems. Absolutely. So don't be rushed to make a decision for somebody. Educate, let them make that decision.
Yep. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I'm here to help you make a good decision. If you want to make a bad decision, I'm going to let you know that it's a bad decision and still put that stuff in for you.
You don't want us to run a blower door and load? That's totally okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. As you wish. I think about the Princess Bride, where he would tell the princess, as you wish, whatever she said, some crazy thing. Like, okay, I let you know all of your options as you wish. You can have what you want. So Jim Kohler, we're in a newly built home in Florida, and about the lowest our humidity gets to is maybe 60%. Yep. And all the homes that are developments have the same issue with no dehumidification and improperly sized. Do you think that might be a problem within the next 5 or 10 years? All of the Southeast is being built like this. You couldn't give me a new home right now. I don't want one. I have no interest unless it's built by a handful of builders. Ed Kiesel, hell yeah, I'll take one of his houses because I know they're built well and I'll do the HVAC.
Yeah, we didn't talk that much about the leakage of these houses, but I mean, the leakage is a real problem too in these super humid places. Because you're not ever going to have a big enough sump pump or bilge pump to remove all the water that's leaking in through all the cracks.
Yep.
Water vapor.
And even a tightish home is still oftentimes not tight enough to do a good job on that. So like a 3ACH50, which is the tightest code out there, which it relates kind of close to a 1-to-1 ratio usually. Blower door CFM 50 to square footage ratio. That is often not good enough to get it done. So there's 600 to 700 homes in that development that can run as high as 60%, and I'm betting they run above at times. That's a time bomb. It just is. The time bombs have been going off in Louisiana, which is considerably more humid still in a lot of cases. This is coming, folks. Offer decline those ventilating dehus. No idea.
There's an answer to that. I think you just have to get a dehumidifier or get 2 of them.
Yep. So I mean, you're out at least $250 for a cheap dehu. And like if you buy a ventilating dehu for yourself, it's $2,000 to $3,500 for the equipment now, something like that. So you can, but yeah, I think you're stuck.
The nice thing about the ventilating DUs is they dehumidify the incoming airstream, which tends to be the best place, the most efficient place to remove the moisture is where the moisture is highest.
Yep. So clarification, I was meaning when the programs and goals are rushed. They generally are, but these were programs that were in place for years. They'd been through multiple bills, and this happened to be the bill that they went through on. So people just
and all
don't
these
know
programs
what the hell they're doing.
Years, so they've known this. This isn't like the New York State program has been in full force since early 2000.
Now, to be fair, there have been people in the New York program that really know what they're doing and really care. But this federal program, people just don't know. It's Dunning-Kruger. We have people on Child's Hill making decisions for us. It's freaking terrible. So when people are like, so the IRA is better than nothing, it freaking isn't. It's going to make our lives harder. We're going to have callbacks. We're going to have to deal with the crap that you caused. Shut the hell up and stop making rules for us. You just made our lives harder. Go away. This is not better. It's a hell of a lot worse. Stop doing this crap. I'm pissed. All right. Offer and decline. Offer ventilating dehus. The good news is we all get to make more money because we're going to sell ventilating dehus, fixing cheap people's problems who are buying the cheap ass piece of crap heat pumps that are on the market right now that don't dehumidify for squat with these 0.9 and 1 sensible heat ratios. Congratulations, policymakers. We've made a bunch of people sick and we've just cost them a ton of money. Good job.
So this is the way. This is the way to really protect yourself, is help the homeowner understand, or maybe not even help them understand, just help them own their decision.
Yeah, exactly. Help them understand. I don't know if this is Rich. I'm betting this is Rich McGrath. But anyway, yeah, sorry. But this riles me up. We're hurting people. This is dumb. And we know better. And there's better ways.
When does government help people?
Ted, you are a lousy liberal, my friend. All right. So are y'all really geared towards getting rebates, government incentives, or doing what's best for the homeowner? What is best for the homeowner every freaking time, every time, like forever. I don't give a damn about incentives.
Actually, what's best for the homeowner comes from the assumption that we treat them like adults and let them decide.
Yep.
And that's what this part of the report, the sales report, does. Says, do you really want to get the IRA? Because if you do, keep in mind what happened.
That was me. I clicked it.
Keep in mind that this is what you're going to get for dehumidification.
Yep.
And are you going to tell them you're not going to sell them the IRA equipment?
No.
Because you got family to feed. And they're adults. They're not children.
Yeah.
So if we treat our clients like adults, give them the education they need to make good decisions so that we're not responsible for their decisions, then sell them what they want. It's up to them at that point.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, then what's going to happen is, like you said, these rebates from the government are never going to disappear. You're never going to stop owning that problem until they disappear or you do.
Well, and the other side of it is you're probably going to do a better job of sizing and installing than the guy who just is a yes man. Yes, I'll sell you, slam in box swapper.
Yeah.
So if you're giving them all these options, a good portion of these people are going to take the better advice. And some of them are still going to, like, I'm only going to be in this house for 2 years. Oh, well, the IRA decision is probably the right one for you. It's not for me to make that decision. It's for the homeowner. You provide them with the information, then let them make the right decision.
as you wish.
Yeah. And then
I'll give you whatever you want.
Yeah. And then offer a whole house ventilating dehumidifier, or like one of the things I do and I've been doing is tell somebody, hey, like you need to get you a couple of dehumidifiers. Just keep your house under 50%. This is on you. You have the means of doing it by buying dehumidifiers. Buy one. That doesn't work, buy another one. If that doesn't work, start buying them until you can't get into your house. And then it'll keep it dry because it's on you. If you're choosing this, just know that here are the potential ramifications for this choice. And if that happens, here's what you're going to have to do. And here's the extremes that could be. Are you okay with that?
Yep.
And you let them make that decision because it's their money, it's their choice. And
they're the operator. They're the operator
Yeah.
of the house. So you can't operate the house anyway.
No.
Yeah.
You're playing doctor. I mean, at the end of the day, the doctor can tell you to go exercise and lose weight. You can completely ignore them.
Nate,
so
I have
the
a
homeowner can
question.
ignore.
Quick question on this, actually. If you have a moment.
Absolutely, Abby, go ahead.
Cool. So I was thinking about the decision-making process, right, from the homeowner.
Mhm.
So I'm putting myself in the shoes of a homeowner, and I have a contractor that is giving me information and shows me this chart and says, this is why you need a dehumidifier. What do you think you should do? I said, you know what, give me a little bit of time. Let me look into this, and I'll think about it and get back to you. So I go home and I actually just, did a Google search. Hey, does my home need a dehumidifier? Which is what I assume like a normal homeowner would search, right? And the information I get is just all over the place.
Yeah.
And
Full
so
spectrum.
then, right, it's all over the spectrum. They're all like blogs written by different, HVAC companies and contractors, and they all conflict with each other. And so as a homeowner, I'm left with no credible source that will help me make this decision. So now, like, does this actually, in the context of like responsibly avoiding responsibility, like, does this actually put you as the contractor at a bit of a risk? Because is it possible that I'm thinking, is this person trying to like upsell me? Do I actually even really need this? Maybe I don't want to go with this contractor because this other person makes me feel really good because they only sell me what they want. And like, how do you account for like, irritating homeowners by treating them as adults? I guess is my question, if that makes sense.
Giving them DIY options and say, don't pay me. Here's what I think you should be worried about. And here's how you can do it for cheaper. And you can cut me out of the process altogether.
That's one way. Build trust that way. The other thing is third-party education is good. So like we've been building that with HVAC 2.0 where, I mean, we have 5.5 minutes of video that helps people avoid a whole lot of different issues. If they will watch 5.5 minutes in one of the larger purchases that they make in their life, behind houses, cars, there's roofing and HVAC and windows are usually your big ones. If they will take 5 minutes to understand, it really helps. So, but it needs to be third party, or like Tanner said, you act as a consultant. Look, you can do this. Part of why in the advanced projects we did, we would give our clients DIY options. Look, you can save money on the blowing the cellulose in the attic if you want to do it yourself. And most of them were like, no, it sounds like work. One of them did it. He did a good job. But it is what it is.
Yeah. I've talked several people out of buying equipment from me and buying just window units and throwing them in. And it was because that was the best option for them.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so that's just sometimes, you have to ask yourself, what are you there for? I mean, you should be there for exploring the options that are going to be the best fit for them. And so sometimes it's them buying window units and dehumidifiers. And so if you don't have that option on the table, then you can't be genuine when you go into that discussion, because deep down you're trying to persuade them into buying something that you would like them to buy when that's not what you should be doing.
That's the whole thing right there, Tanner. You have to genuinely not care what they're buying. You want to do your best to consult with them and act as a consultant to help guide them towards the best solution for them, and then let them make the choice.
And so a quick follow-up on that. My sense of it is that sometimes homeowners are not comfortable being treated as adults, right? I can imagine a scenario where a homeowner says, I paid you because you are the expert. Why don't you tell me what is best for me and what I should be doing. Why am I making these decisions?
Because I'm here for free.
Yeah, that's
advice supports what you paid for.
you?
We have a paid service that we can help you determine what to do, which comes back to this comment. I've just gotten away from offering blower door tests because of time. I understand. But if that is on the table as an option and you're not pushing it, you're just merely making them aware. And I mean, you might let them know, like, this one looks like it's kind of a doozy. I mean, it's totally up to you. It's not my money, but I'd lean that way if it were me. But I never.
Our process does this automatically for you. So you offer, you get the decline, you document the decline, and you keep going.
Yep.
It doesn't take you. You get paid for the blower door, or you don't pull the blower door out. That's it.
Yep. Yeah. There's no in the middle.
It's a very simple equation. It's not complicated.
Yeah. The options are just on the table. You're not throwing them at them saying, oh, we have to do this every time, or you're not going to do this every time. It's just there. And so it's just as bad to go in and say, hey, I'm going to run this blower door on your house and you're going to pay me for it. That's just as bad as not offering it at all. And then assuming there's not going to be problems. Because then what, you're just going to put in a unit and have an extremely leaky house that still sucks the way it had before, and you made promises that this unit's going to solve everything. Then what happens?
Yeah,
but you can visually see all those leaks, Tanner.
Oh yeah, that's
you
right.
should know that.
There was that one article that said you don't have
You
to.
should know that.
Ah.
Don't talk back like that.
Guess about the leakage on a house.
Leakage.
I take it back.
Guess leakage.
Corbett Lunsford says he can't guess leakage, but people that have never used a blower door can.
I can't guess leakage. I've been shocked. I never know what's coming.
When you use a blower door, you always guess the leakage, and then you look at the number and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that was wrong."
Yeah, I was
wrong. Or my guess was right.
It's funny. That's the differentiating factor of someone that actually does the testing is the ones that's like, oh, well, you can just look and guess. That's the person that's never even probably seen a blower door. And the person that's like, oh, there's no way I could guess this at all. That's the one that's actually ran a bunch of them. And it's funny how that works.
It is funny how that works.
Yeah,
it's almost like they're just a ego-driven moron, but that's neither here nor there.
Tell us how you really feel, Tanner. Yeah, there's so much of this stuff, but in whoever you're looking for and talking to, look for people with real boots on the ground experience that have measured after the fact. I forget. I mean, does it go back to Sun Tzu? Maybe like strategy. It basically is defeated as soon as it meets the enemy. Like it changes as soon as you get there. So we can design and say this should work in theory as much as we want until you go out there and do it and try it. You don't know. That's why I tried the Bosch in our house. I had heard from some people it worked okay, and I've heard from other people that it didn't. I am profoundly disappointed by that piece of equipment, but I tried it. I put my own money on the line.
Oh, Tim's here now. Oh, he keeps jumping in and out. But Reedy,
I'm here.
Reedy, tell him. Reedy, when it.
Oh yeah.
Sale today. Go ahead.
Yeah, I went to a guy today. Actually, it was a comfort consult that I went to last week, and I did my second. Because we always go back just to go over the report with him. He put in a Bosch. And he did it because of the energy savings. He put in, it was a 3-ton outdoor, 2-ton indoor kind of unit. The static pressure was pretty good on it. It was 0.25. All else was pretty good, but it would not dehumidify. He said, that's the thing I noticed. It just wouldn't dehumidify. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about it. He told me about it. This guy got this Bosch. He had 5 different quotes. He had a quote for somebody offered him a quote for a 5-stage, the VNA8, and he didn't take it because the quote was like for $15,000. And he said, there's no way under the sun. So this guy's bought this Bosch. He's got the Bosch thermostat that goes with it. I don't know what it's called, but he's got that. He was disgusted by it because it wouldn't dehumidify beyond 65%. So He got himself a couple other thermostats that said they would dehumidify. He finally found the Ecobee, got the 5th version of the Ecobee. It wasn't doing good in dehumidification. He went and he bought the 6th version of the Ecobee, and he had Lowe's install it. They installed it wrong. It was running his heat strips forever. He spent $912 one month. And the only thing that's helped this guy is he has 2 dehumidifiers in his house. And I don't know how he did it, but somehow or other he figured out dew point, and he figured a way to set those to come on when the dew point in his house, they would come on. And that's the only way that he got his house to where it's reasonable. And I don't mean reasonable like 50%. I mean reasonable like 55%. And it's good enough for him, but boy, 2 dehumidifiers, and he's spending how much on those dehumidifiers?
Hey, Timmy, you got anybody in your life that recently bought a Bosch?
I do. Somebody who scored high on a comfort consult on their pain point on the cooling, and they declined a comfort consult, even though they had a 9 on their cooling problem, and said they wanted to make a decision quick. I offered them, knowing they had high pain, I offered them a green speed, a VNA 8, and they had said some stuff about allergies, so fresh air. It was a pretty good quote, I think around 20, 25 grand, something like that. And they declined it, and somebody else offered them a Bosch for cheaper, and so they went with that, which is that's their adult decision. And this person's also an engineer and declined the testing, which I thought was kind of strange. But hey, those engineers know best,
Yeah, and did he ask you? He said to you, what piece of equipment would you be comfortable recommending without doing the comfort consult? Because you would have probably been comfortable recommending a Bosch had you done the comfort consult. Because you
Daughter's having a party.
Yeah, she is, which is why I've been absent and on mute. But yeah, I think there was a chance we could have got to the Bosch, but without testing, without really investigating his house, I wasn't going to take on the responsibility of the risk of that working or not working. So I told him, one of the questions that I asked him was, if you're getting the same performance out of a new piece of equipment, are you going to be mad at me? And he said, I suppose I would. Those were his exact words. I suppose I would.
Oh, okay, boy. So he's going to be mad at you that he bought the Bosch from somebody else.
He might be.
You can't win.
Yeah. You can never win.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really funny.
Oh,
So
you'll be winning. You'll be at your house all
folks.
comfortable. He's the one that's not winning.
Right.
To make it clear to folks, there's a 4-question quiz
Yep.
that we call the comfort score. And those 4 questions lead to typically 7 out of 10 people getting a free quote and 3 out of 10 going for the comfort consult, where they pay for the blower door test. So this is helping you understand that 30% of the people that you're running out and giving free quotes to probably have big enough problems at their house that they're willing to pay for a more thorough investigation before they get a quote.
Yep.
And so by using this very quick to use comfort quiz, you can determine if somebody's got a 9 on one of the questions, they probably should get a comfort consult. In fact, typically what we do is like 1 to 10, you're a free quote, or 1 to 12. Between 10 or 12 and 18 or 20, you're a coin flip. And then above that, you're a strong recommend for a comfort consult, unless you're an engineer, because usually most engineers want a comfort consult just because they're curious. They want to learn more about their house. So this guy was totally an outlier.
And we give engineers a hard time because there's oftentimes overthinking, and then oftentimes good decisions, and then sometimes not so much.
Well,
but
this guy
engineers are
certainly
consistently a
didn't
little
overthink.
tricky to work with.
He underthought.
Yeah,
Well,
this one did. That's for sure.
And another situation I have, I just did a replacement for a Bosch engineer. Now he doesn't work for Bosch Comfort, but he works for Bosch. Has a lot of facets,
Right.
And I did offer him
Automotive or something.
Yeah, he works for the video camera set, whatever. So I offered him a comfort console. He declined, and then I offered him static pressure testing, and he said he didn't need it. He said wasn't allowed, whatever. He had all these excuses, and before I disconnected his old equipment that was still functioning, he had like furnace coil, so it was like a 1.5 static pressure. And we went back.
1.5. You took it because you
Whoa.
wanted to know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I took it, and then the new one was like a 1.3 because I put a larger filter on it, included in my quote. But engineer, he said it wasn't loud. He said it wasn't a problem. So
apparently, it won't be loud or a problem. Hopefully,
yeah, it's not a problem for
not a problem for you. Replacing motors would be just nonsense.
He did, and I have it in writing. He declined it. So
right.
You go, and you have to do that, unfortunately, and particularly as we're moving to ECMs, like PSC motors, the old school motors, like they take 1 and 1.5 inches of static. These new ones, you got like 6, 12, 24, maybe 36 months, and they roach. Well, that's okay. They're only $1,500, $2,000 a piece. Nobody cares, and then you can do it the same thing again. And Abby, going back to a point that you made, I can easily see maybe 50 to 70% of homeowners declining dehumidification units to pinch pennies. Heck yeah. The point there is just to offer.
Yeah, it's a soft offer. It's not an arm twist.
Nope. Just making you aware that this is likely to be an issue, and this is one of the better solutions to that particular issue. You don't need to take it now, but you may need to be aware of this in the future if you watch your humidity and it's a problem. So now you're being gentle. There's no arm twisting. There's no changing names going all 1 hour or something. 59-minute air.
Himo 59-minute air, people. You got to watch out for them.
So there's no coercion here at all. You're just letting people know what's going on.
Stay in your department.
Humidity removal system.
It's important when you say that, Nate, there's no coercion. Don't you be coerced either into taking the role as the hero, expert, super guy, because as soon as you do, they're coming back on you with the
they are. Callbacks and warranties, here we come.
Irresponsibly assuming responsibility.
Yeah, if you don't offer them that dehumidifier, at some point you are going to get to put one in for free.
Yeah. Maybe
you'll make it 6 months, maybe you'll make it a decade, but sooner or later you're probably going to be buying one.
You'll sell a lot of them after the fact to people who don't like you now. Also, so you'll put one or two of them in for free, but you'll also have a lot of people that are calling you and saying nasty things about you to their neighbors.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to go put in free equipment for somebody that's about to leave you a terrible review. And so like bringing up Abby's point again, if it's somebody in a situation to where they're kind of, trying to look to pinch pennies and they don't have the money, maybe it's a good idea to also bring up to them, be like, hey, maybe you're not a good candidate to chase these incentives because the equipment that's going to qualify, it may force you to get a dehumidifier in the future. So maybe you get the cheaper end unit and then save that additional budget to buy standalone dehumidifiers if needed.
Yep. Or we run that smaller coil, in which case it doesn't qualify anymore. We run a different piece of equipment, like what we're running here. This won't qualify. So let's see here. We got one other good comment here. I've got a commercial train precedent with Honeywell 8000 commercial that runs gas and AC at the same time, pretty much all spring and summer. So that's reheat, but that isn't hot gas reheat. That's flat out gas reheat, and you can only get that in commercial systems where the furnace heat exchanger comes after the coil. There are no residential systems that do that.
Yeah, residential. That's preheat. That's preheat, not reheat.
Yeah, it's that's one way to go, and I mean that can work.
It'll save you money. Preheat.
Maybe. Keeps life interesting. And then Steve Demansky was in here. I'm trying to, where is, here we are. So thanks, Steve. This was a little bit ago, so he may be gone now, but appreciate that. So yeah, we're trying that. This one is weird. Normally we aren't trying to talk to policy folks as well as HVAC, but in this case we are. But if you're an HVAC contractor, watch your butt with all of this electrification stuff. Like I said at the beginning, we're a decade into doing electrifications, or darn near 9 years. And dehumidification has been by far our largest and most difficult struggle. Actually meeting heat load, not a problem. That's what resistance is for. You put 10 or 15 kW in, you got 34 to 51,000 BTUs. You're fine in addition to the heat pump. It's not a problem. I'm very, very seldom worried about heating. Now, dehumidification, I'm scared. And you should be too. So hopefully that is helpful. And there's our key takeaways. Efficiency standards and programs are pushing us towards equipment with lower dehumidification capabilities, right as we need more. I didn't really dive into this that much, but houses without vapor barriers on the ground are hard because you're dealing with all the moisture that's coming through the earth as well. And then we hammered home, always offer ventilating dehu. So hopefully that was helpful to everyone. Oh, that's funny. Hate to see their gas bill. Yep. I don't know. You're just running the air conditioner and the furnace at the same time. You know, it couldn't be too bad, right? It's only a commercial building. Lots of square footage, lots of space. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Does anybody else have something you want to add before we go to after show?
Thank you for everybody who participated in the questions.
Yeah, good discussion tonight. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate everyone coming.
Thank you guys for all showing up.
Yep. And I think next week we're going to talk about failure to communicate and talk about communicating equipment a little bit more deeply. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Good night.